So what we have here is a series of lightning talks. And the way it'll work is that we'll each have a series of speakers in different fields who will share their ideas, their research innovations, and entrepreneurial ventures using open data and big data. Each speaker will have 7 minutes and then a 2-minute warning, so 9 minutes or so. I'll invite them up one at a time, and just to ensure that everyone has enough time to speak, we'll have them one after the other, and then if we have time for questions at the end, we'll invite those from the floor. So our first speaker is Susan O'Donnell. She's senior researcher in the Human-Computer Interaction Group at the National Research Council, specializing in digital technologies for community development.
Thanks very much. So I was originally told I had 3 and then 5, and now I have 9, so this is wonderful. Okay, I'm going to be talking about a First Nations data governance policy that was developed by 3 research partners that I've been working with over there, going back almost 10 years. First of all, in Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq, which is an education organization, that has a division called Atlantic Canada's First Nation Help Desk that services all the First Nations in Atlantic region, including New Brunswick. And then the First Nations Education Council in Quebec. Well, the Atlantic one's based in Membertou First Nation. The First Nations Education Council is based in Wendake, Quebec, and they provide services to First Nations in that province. And then the final partner is Kiiwetinoong, which is the Northern Chiefs Council that provides services to First Nations in Ontario and primarily a wider range of services in northwestern Ontario. So what all of these partners have in common is they provide broadband services and support and training and development in all the remote and rural First Nations in their regions, which includes developing fiber networks within the communities, supporting telehealth applications, distance education. They all got started with ICT in schools. And I've been working with them on a research project for going on 10 years now that's now called First Nations Innovation. And I just wanted to prominently highlight that it's been supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council for the last 10 years, which is a tremendous support for us, with in-kind contributions from the project partners. And I'm also an adjunct professor. Bill, I'd never let my adjunct lapse, so I'm still an adjunct professor at University of New Brunswick, and they're the home for this project. So this policy has, do I have a little, okay. Just have to see here. No, that's not it. Is this it? The big green button. Thank you very much. This policy has 6 aspects. The first one is definition of data. I should say too that we work on a wide range of research studies related to the use of broadband technology in communities. This is just one small part, data governance. And we've been doing some work on this for the last year and a half. So the first aspect of this policy is defining data, which the digital information generated by a community. So of course it encompasses, when you think of communities, it encompasses everything from finance, health, research, education. The next aspect of the policy is community jurisdiction over data. So this is where it gets that, you know, there'll be some interesting issues when we think about open data and then community jurisdiction over data. And I'll maybe talk a bit more about that on the next slide. But the idea here, or the policy here, is that jurisdiction over data rests with the community, and each autonomous First Nation has the right to determine how jurisdiction is interpreted and enforced. So every community can decide how it wants to, what it wants to do with its data. And where this becomes important is how communities share data with external entities. For those of us doing research with First Nation communities, one of the big barriers that we have is that there's probably no dirtier word in First Nation communities than research, unfortunately. And that's because of the way research data has been used against First Nations for many, many decades. Unfortunately, there's all kinds of unfortunate examples. And so research and researchers have a very bad name. So anytime that people go into First Nation communities and want to collect data, there's a lot of suspicion and everything that goes along with that, and for the most part, quite rightly so. And so there are protocols that are being developed now about sharing data, that have been developed, I should say, about sharing data with external entities. And so again, the communities have the authority to decide which community data will be shared with external entities, such as governments and researchers. And so the way it is, and the way it's developing, is that First Nations should restrict data sharing to minimal levels required by law or contract and negotiate confidentiality clauses. I should say that all the partners that I'm working with are also involved in the Assembly of First Nations IT working group that's developing these protocols across the country. Okay, the next one is, oh yes, having formal data sharing agreements. That any time that there's data to be shared, that they should be formal agreements that outline the roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities for sharing amongst the partners, that clarify all the details of the data and how it's going to be used, etc. The support for community data governance, that the ideal situation is for First Nations to manage data governance themselves. And in some cases that's happening, especially in some of the larger communities that have the capacity to do this. But in many cases, there's a need for more support for developing the capacity to do this. And then the last point is data governance requirements. So there needs to be an enabling environment that includes technical infrastructure and personnel, security, data transparency, privacy. All of these things are in development and need to be development. And the whole idea here, I mentioned some of the negative aspects, but this comes back to why they would want to do this from a positive perspective, or what would be, why would they want to do this other than protecting their data? Well, if the data is so valuable, how can it be used to benefit the First Nations? And I made a point this morning in my question about how's open data going to benefit the rural communities in New Brunswick? And I think many of the there's a lot of common issues here, which is if big data is just going to be about sucking up data from communities and not really giving back really positive benefits in terms of what really needs to happen here and in many First Nation communities, which is jobs, frankly. That's what needs to happen. There needs to be economic development, and it should be about jobs. So how can communities, how can rural communities, how can remote communities harness the data that they have, the valuable data that they have in the communities, to create economic opportunities? And so that's what really this data governance policy is all about, and where things are going, certainly with First Nations across the country. And I'm pleased to be part of this project. We have, I should say that we share all of our data in the form of publications that are available on the website. We have a bilingual website there and also a publication website, and there's my contact details. So, whoops, I didn't press that. There's my contact details and the details of the websites. I also have copies of the data governance policy that I brought with me, printed copies or digital copies if you'd like to have them. I'd be welcome to share them. So thanks very much to my partners and for all of you for listening. Thank you.
So the next speaker is Paul Peters, Dr. Paul Peters. He's a assistant professor and Canada Research Chair in Population Health Inequalities at UNB and a colleague of mine.
I'm going to try and speak up. My voice is a little bit croaky today, so I apologize. I also do have more time than I thought. I did also think they only had 3 minutes, so I thought it would have to be lightning fast, but now it just has to be fast. And I don't have a fancy presentation for you. I'm here to talk about some work that I did in past life. I used to work at StatsCan. I worked there for 6 years in the Health Analysis Division, and I worked a lot on record linkage. And this is another area of what I see as another area for open data. And it's not making data accessible, but it's making data accessible to link. And this is a big difference in that the data that's accessible to link is still used by researchers. It's in a controlled format, but you're able to link it and you're able to make it accessible. And this is another step in open data and making data available to people. So what I did there is I did a lot of work in record linkage. Record linkage at a most basic level is just linking two different data sets by a common identifier. The technical aspects of record linkage come from Canada, a lot of it. One of the former chief statisticians of Canada published a lot on it, Ivan Filegi. It's used across many different areas, and a lot of different jurisdictions use record linkage, particularly in the health research area. Manitoba, Ontario, and BC are three large jurisdictions that use it extensively, as well Statistics Canada uses it, as do many other agencies. And New Brunswick and many of the other provinces are beginning to join up with this and become places to do record linkage themselves. Record linkage is critical for exploring population-based research and to expand beyond the topics that we think of normally of well-being. So one of the projects, to give you an example, that I worked on at StatsCan was called the 1991 Census Cohort. This was developed by, primarily by a person named Russell Wilkins started in about 2003. It was eventually completed in 2006. It took about 3 years to do, and this was a linking of the 1991 census long form, back when we had the long forms, and before they were canceled, was linked to mortality, followed up for 11 years. So what it enabled people to do was to look at the characteristics available in the long form census, such as education, such as occupation, such as age, marital status, immigrant status, language, place of residence, and look at this and compare it based on health outcomes, namely life expectancy and mortality. You might think, okay, well, that's no big deal. I mean, you know, what can we learn from that? We know that poor people, you know, generally don't live long and all these sort of things that you see in the media. Well, in reality, at a Canadian level, we didn't have any of that evidence prior to this. None of this evidence actually existed. This was one of the first data sources at the Canadian level where we could actually begin to look at mortality by different groups, by occupational groups, by marital status, by people who are homeless and marginally housed. This type of information was in the census. When I arrived at StatsCan, this data source was already well underway, and pretty soon afterwards, we embarked on a process of expanding it. We added an additional 10 years, or we added the ability to add an additional 10 years. Plus, we linked it to cancer. And because of the technical aspect, where we linked it to what's called a tax summary file, which is essentially just the names and postal codes and marital status of individuals from tax files, the non-income things, we were able to get people's place of residence over this whole follow-up period. So we were able to create a cohort which had rich sociodemographic information from 1991, plus we had cancer from 1969 through 2010 now. So we had a cancer-free cohort at 91. We had mortality, which included cause of death, and we had people's postal code of residence. And this was all available via record linkage. And from this, we can look at analyzing different intervention rates. We can create sub-cohorts of this. We can create control groups. We can compare different regions, combine different, with other data sets. One of the largest things we've done with this is we've combined it with environmental data sets using postal codes, which have a geographic basis, where we combined it with environmental and air pollution, so we can then look at the air pollution effects on individuals within this cohort. So this type of record linkage really provides a lot of different benefit. But how does it come about? And really what I wanted to come and talk about today. Within StatsCan, there's a very defined process on how record linkage can happen. Information, the information from a record linkage has to be used to provide statistical information that facilitates a better understanding of Canadian society, economy, and environment, and is clearly in the public interest. The confidentiality of persons needs to be maintained. There needs to be a demonstrable cost or respondent burden savings, and the outputs must meet the confidentiality provisions of the Statistics Act. Those are the requirements for record linkage at StatsCan. Very clearly laid out, very simple. And overall, those things are relatively easy to overcome. We can have the confidentiality requirements. We know there's a benefit. We know that it's a cost savings. We know that there's a respondent burden, there's a savings and respondent burden. So all these technical aspects are maintained, but how do record linkages come about? Well, one of the key things that's required in record linkages is the key champions and leadership within this. The original record linkage of the census was done by a person, Russell Wilkins, I mentioned his name. He was really instrumental in this. He was an individual who knew the system, who knew the different data sets, and knew people throughout the organization who could then facilitate this linkage. And he worked with these people, and he worked with the people in senior management to get this to come about. There's also required interagency and intersectoral cooperation. Within StatsCan, it was relatively easy because you have just different divisions that needed to work together. So we have Census Division on the one hand, and Vital Statistics, which is a Health Statistics Division. But at the same time, Vital Statistics comes from the provinces. 2 minutes, okay. So we needed intersectoral, so we needed to have buy-on from the provinces for that. There also needed to be a dedicated group of users. Well, the funding was developed in conjunction with a group of academics and with the Public Health Agency of Canada, who really said that we need this in order to answer real policy questions. And there needed to be perseverance. They started this process in 2003. It took till 2006 to get done. 3 years for it to get through. It went up to Policy Committee at StatsCan, which is a senior level committee at StatsCan. Numerous times, it went all the way to the Privacy Commissioner of Canada and a full privacy assessment done. They persevered and they kept it going, and it was eventually done. And really, the key thing in this linkage and with all linkages is the importance of the relationships between the individuals and agencies in developing record linkages. And I would suggest that in a place like New Brunswick, where the idea of record linkage is just sort of nascent, where it's coming about, it really is these key linkages and these key relationships between different agencies, between different individuals that can overcome these sort of technical solutions and the resources. The technical solutions such as privacy, they're really easy to overcome. We know how to do that. We know how to do encryption. We know how to make our data set secure. We know how to do masking. We know how to make sure that our cell counts are fine. All those technical things were figured out, and we can figure out, and we can figure them out along the way. What's key is developing these relationships between certain individuals and different agencies where we can develop the trust where these things can happen. And I think that this really can assist in developing the best practices, the best privacy procedures, and in the best methods for disseminating research in support of the public good. And that's all I have to say about record linkage. Thanks a lot.
The third speaker is Jake Arsenault, co-founder, the Black Arcs, founder and former CEO of Inversa Systems, and Lori Claire, Black Arcs. We have them in the house. There you
go. Hi, time for a lightning talk. And I think this will give you a viewpoint, I think, about, well, first, a big thanks for GovMaker for having the session and giving us this chance to engage the local community. We're going to give you the viewpoint of a new company, so a startup, looking to make use of data to do something new, to create value and also have an impact. So bringing together different backgrounds, so my work associate, Lori Claire, interest in humanities and a background in real long-term mission policy. My background, innovation, technology, basically taking data and math to create value. We're looking to bring together these concepts to use, I guess, data to create, I guess, an innovation or new type of software. We're bringing together art and science to create a little bit of enlightenment. So we're hoping to, I guess, fill a hole in the marketplace that if we do that, or I guess the social space, that'll let other people move quicker and do more things. So, you know, we're creating a for-profit venture, but it's a social impact company. So the idea is that we want to test our merit by, will somebody pay us for our offerings that's using data, but we want to pick an offering that when it's used, it will create a positive social impact. So that's how we're trying to marry this. The idea is to create a benefits corporation. And to have a positive social impact. We've been out doing our local research, so mainly out talking to people, and we'll talk about our solution, and then talk about the problem, and then the solution we're looking to solve with our offering. So I think the problem, and I think this fits to, I think, connects to data and the movement of more civic engagement. I think that like how the dot-com bubble popped and how the housing bubble popped, I think there's a much bigger bubble popping right now, and that's the economy is out in the real world, and that our endeavors are affecting the planetary system. So an example would be climate change and CO2. So I think it's a big issue, but it's also a local issue. And I think it's a real challenge in terms of information and how we plan and how we live. Because really, you look at it, there's an aggregate of millions of local decisions, and those local decisions of how we live, what we do, how we use land, that's having global long-term consequences. So I think to manage this, it needs to be more of an emergent process or more of a discussion. And there's a need for using information, civic engagement, to get people to work together in I guess, an emergent process. So I think it needs to be a multi-stakeholder, continuous discussion. And I think being able to use data effectively is part of that solution. So what we're looking to do is create, I guess, some tools that would act as a noise filter for a multi-stakeholder discussion about the local decisions we make and how it affects the global context. And the way we're looking to do that is we want to actually marry together art and science together to create a little bit of enlightenment. So the offering we want to specialize in that uses data is we want to create, I guess the art part is it's built like an infographic. So a very high-level visual view that's a really human creation that lets anybody really understand key issues that are affecting the local community and relative to the global context. So I think it's like an infographic, that kind of great design. But we want to marry that with predictive analytics. So taking source data, using that to make predictions about the future, where people can understand trends and issues. So there's key arcs or trends or trade-offs, and looking to make that interactive, but also to let people interact with it. So it's not a static infographic, but it's a full-blown model that you can look at and play with and really understand the situation. So I think if you're looking at doing predictive models, it's a black art, and that I like the quote that all models are wrong, some are useful. So it's creating some straightforward models that let you see the key trade-offs and really understand and interact with local issues. So I think having people play with it and understand it in a more hands-on, tactile way, when you do have these multi-stakeholder discussions, like say urban planning, land use, or some other key issue, having that high-level analytical view, basically taking the analytical tools that traditionally only sit in institutions and getting it out to within culture where people can play with these things real time and linked to the source data. So I think it's just a new tool for civic engagement that will help discussions we need to have, but that the key is that it's linked to the source data and is always up to date. So again, I'd like to really thank GovMaker for giving us a chance to engage the room. And not kidding, like we're working on our designs of what this tool could be and how it could be used and talking at different levels of government. But now that there's a whole lot of smart people in the room, not looking just to talk, but to engage. So if you look on your table, you'll see some brightly colored sticky notes. Our ask is that if you're, say, a policy expert or a concerned citizen, like to know your thoughts. So is there a key policy issue that really this tool should be created to address? Or as a citizen, what would you like to see or be concerned about in the future? So if you could take a sticky, if you don't have a thought, that's fine. But if you have a vision or a thought or a concern, take the sticky note, sketch out something you'd like to see. It could be left brain or right brain, so it could be more of art. It could be something very analytical, but really like to see it. And as part of the open data philosophy, you could put it on the window over there, then everybody else can see it. So I guess this is a chance just to get some issues on the table about what sort of predictions or tools or infographic you think everybody should see to have a conversation to create positive change. Okay. So I think I'm actually finished. I have 2 minutes to spare. So I think I have a time for a question maybe, or? Okay, we're good. All right, thank you.
Next speaker is Patty Ryan, President and CEO of Health QR.
Well, hello, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm feeling really short behind this podium. Do we have a presentation coming up? Or I'm just giving it 1 second. First, I'd like to say that it's a real pleasure to be here, and I feel like I'm in a room of kindred spirits. I'm formerly with the Nova Scotia Department of Health and Wellness, policy wonk myself, worked with intergovernmental affairs for a number of years, and in the Office of Health Transformation. So it's great to see so many people here in the room representing government. Can I get a show of hands? I'd like to get a sense. Who here actually is working with government and policy or in another space right now? Government reps here? Fabulous. How many researchers are in the room? Wonderful. And entrepreneurs like myself, people that are students? Very few. Can I get you to raise your hand if you're a healthcare consumer? Thank you. That's the hat I'd like you to put on as I'm going through the talk, because we all have our roles, and I've had my role in government, and we all work in a regulatory environment, legislative environment, or we're working with research and privacy. But I'd like you to think about what health data means to you, your personal health data means to you as a consumer. And that's what we're going to work on. I'm going to tell you really briefly about Health QR and what we're up to. We're a startup company like Jake. We're working in the personal health records space, as they refer to. I'm having to learn a whole new language in the startup community. What we've created is a software solution in the digital personal health record space that allows prescription customers to take control of their prescription information from their pharmacist. So our solution is an information sharing network. So it works in a reciprocal way between your healthcare provider, in this case your pharmacist, and you as a prescription customer. Our mission, the lofty mission that it is around the democratization of health information. And I've got a clicker here? I do. Let's see. Perfect. So this comes from my public health, primary health care days. We all know the iceberg mentality. We know that we're just dealing in health with the tip of the iceberg. And there is a brilliant emergency room physician from Halifax that I worked with in health transformation. And he said, Patty, there's only 2 ways to fix the healthcare system, because we had this huge office working on Nova Scotia solutions around health transformation. He said, you create efficiencies or you mitigate demand. There's nothing else to do. So we like to think that our solution is providing a helping hand to both ends of that solution. From the pharmacy end, we know that we're going to help the pharmacists create efficiencies, especially in this brave new world where pharmacists are given an expanded scope of practice. We see them coming out from behind the counter. They're taking on more and more responsibilities. But specifically, the empowered, engaged consumer who has some control of their personal health information makes a better partner with whatever healthcare provider that they're working with. And we think that that's going to help to mitigate demand. So we're talking about the democratization of health data. So what are we talking about in terms of data? Open data, what we're here today, what's accessible to you. Your health data, your clinical information, your lab information, your prescription information. Big data, the volume, the velocity, the variety of data. And a lot of people making plays in this space. But there's a whole new world that's actually called the consumerization of health data, where people are already taking control of other aspects. We're looking at digital medical devices, blood glucose monitors, blood pressure cuffs. We have network devices and sensors, if anybody's got a Fitbit on them or a Nike Plus, all of this data. Self-monitoring information to help people live in their homes much longer. And the big one that everybody wants, the commercialization and consumerization of your genome data. So we've already seen 23andMe out of California. People are starting to take control of this information outside of the government-controlled areas that have our information. But it's all your data. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter who's got control of it. Legally, that information belongs to you, the healthcare consumer. Part of our philosophy at Health QR as we're building this is that we believe strongly in what's referred to as a data commons. So a data commons provides the opportunity for individuals who have access to their data to provide it as a commodity into an open sharing platform. So while we're still in the building blocks of our solution, we've just deployed to our first pharmacy last week, We recognize that once we reach a critical mass, that there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity for individuals who have gained control of their information to do something with that. And it's really only their decision what they do with it. So I want you to think about this as a consumer. And I want you to think of it in terms of, do you donate blood? Do you sign an organ donor card? Do you give money to charities that you really care about? And do you volunteer your time for worthy activities? And why? A data commons works the same way. Think of your blood. Think of the organs that if you've signed your organ donor card. I always trip over that one. It's a commodity that you have that can help save lives, that can help contribute to broader social good, and it's yours to give or it's yours to use as a commodity. And we believe actually that it's a commodity. And we believe there's a lot of other people out there that are looking to gain control of that, of something that legally belongs to you in order to do that. But we believe that an informed, educated consumer is going to actually want to contribute their aggregate level data into a data commons themselves. I have a family history of type 2 diabetes. If I had access to my long-term data, would I want to contribute it to people who are working on research and cures for diabetes? Yes, I would. And I think that a lot of other people would like to contribute their aggregate data. One of the first steps in this is allowing people to have access and control over to what legally belongs to them, which is their health data. So I'm not the only one that thinks about this. Obviously, there's a lot of other people. So in a recent report by CHI, Canada Health Infoway, they said they took a look at the US model, what's going on in the States. In terms of that efficiency model, how to fix the healthcare system, they're saying in states they could save about $300 billion a year if they could start gathering data from sources that they don't have access to. There are tremendous efficiencies. And we, in Canada, as a universal healthcare system, that's your money that we're saving. That's the taxpayers' money. On a broader scope, in terms of health outcomes, we've got Mr. Page, who just a few months ago made the interesting comment publicly around a similar conference to this, that right now we don't data mine health data. But if we did, we could save about 100,000 lives a year. And you know what? Google's right. We could probably save more. But is it Google's responsibility to data mine your data, your health data? You're here talking about privacy and security. That is not Google's responsibility to do that. But would the individual citizen care about saving 100,000 lives if they had the opportunity? There's my 2 minutes. We believe that they would. And we're building a platform, an information sharing platform, that gives people control of their access and then allows them to share that information back. So I have one final slide, and if everything's working, and our technician over here, I have two heroes out that I follow constantly and that actually inspired me down this, to leave my beautiful government job that I love so dearly, and to come into this self-employment space. And one of them, his name is Dave DeBronkart. And he started the e-patient movement about 12 years ago. And if this works, and we can get the video going, it was supposed to auto start, but it looks like it's not going to. Is there anything we can do on your end to click the button? He has a fabulous 30-second video, which is not going to play. Technology is great when it works, isn't it? That's okay. Don't worry about it. I encourage you to look up Dave DeBronkart, and I put another name down there, Salvatore, and both of them have tremendous TED Talks out there. They both have used data to save their lives personally, taking control of their personal health information. And they're both alive today when they were given terminal diagnoses because they did take control of their health information. And they made a decision to, Salvatore especially, to open source his data. He put it online. So when we talk about the privacy and security controls, it's up to the individual when they gain control of it, what they do with it. He crowdsourced a cure for his brain cancer. He put it online, and he had over 100,000 people online responding to his plea for information on how to treat and cure his brain cancer. So two amazing individuals that inspire me to keep going down this road, and I encourage you to look them up. And I think my time is up. Thanks very much, everybody.
Our fifth speaker is Jody LeBlanc, Values and Ethics Advisor with Veterans Affairs Canada and Outreach and Engagement Advisor with the GC 2.0 Tools Team at Treasury Board of Canada.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's hard to believe that 90% of the world's data was created in the past 2 years. I first became interested in open data when my colleagues Sean Kibbe and Ryan Andersoff launched their OC bus tracker in Ottawa using real-time GPS open data. I then became an open data enthusiast when Minister Tony Clement introduced Canada's Action Plan on Open Data, the Open Data Portal, and the Open Government License. Last year, I had the opportunity to attend Love and Data session and an open data speed dating, and I began reading about open data and open government as much as I could. Open data feels like what social media was 5 years ago. Individuals didn't know a lot about it, so they chose not to talk about it. Now social media is part of daily conversations in some form or another. We need to make it easier for our colleagues and our citizens to continuously see the benefits and the value of open government and open data. Some of you may be aware of CODE, the Canadian Open Data Experience, which was the first nationwide open data hackathon in Canada. It was an intense 48-hour coding sprint where innovators from coast to coast competed to build the best app utilizing federal government data from the Canadian Open Data Portal. The Appathon helped organizations unleash the possibilities of open data through the Government of Canada's Open Data Program. CODE aimed to inspire an entire generation of developers and designers to develop apps based on open data. The CODE Hackathon brought together developers from across the country working around the 48-hour clock, creating apps that would increase opportunities and constitute tools Canadians could use to make day-to-day life easier. CODE broke the record for the largest competitive hackathon in Canada with over 900 participants all the way from Victoria to Gander. 230 teams and 110 apps were submitted. The Inspiration Day held over 700 simultaneous online viewers at its peak. It was so successful that there are now discussions for CODE 2.0. From air and water quality monitoring to border wait times to information on permanent residency applications, crime statistics, and vehicle recalls, open data has the potential to drive social, political, and economic change. As Minister Tony Clement says, this data is a treasure trove of information that offers endless possibilities for researchers, innovators, and entrepreneurs. The winner of CODE was a team called Electric Sheep. They developed an app called New Routes, which matches new Canadians with cities that will give them the greatest opportunity to maximize their potential, be successful, and be productive citizens of Canada. By using data sets in income, visible minority populations, crime rates, housing opportunities, climate, unemployment rates, and labor industries, New Routes was able to rank each major city in Canada for analysis. Just going to show you a quick 1-minute video so you can see their application.
This is Nick. He's new to Canada and looking to start a new life with his family. He dreams of living in Vancouver surrounded by snow-capped mountains or in the high-rises of Toronto. With 1/3 of the Canadian workforce made up of new Canadians by the year 2031, and only 24% of those workers actually finding a job in their field of expertise, how will Nick know which city can offer him the most opportunity for success and is the best match for him? Introducing New Routes, an application built to match new Canadians like Nick to cities based on their skills and preferences. This is how it works. Nick logs into his computer, tablet, or smartphone and types getnewroutes.com. Nick then answers a few easy preference questions while marking each with an overall importance level illustrated with up to 3 thumbs up. The New Routes compatibility system then analyzes his preferences and immediately lists out the top cities in Canada that are the perfect match for Nick. He is able to compare each of these cities by looking at their compatibilities in average income levels, crime rates, job industries, cultural group populations, available affordable housing, climate ratings, and overall employment scores. New Routes is easy to use and is committed to matching new Canadians with cities that will give them the greatest opportunity to maximize their potential. Try New Routes today by visiting getnewroutes.com.
So they created that within 48 hours. Imagine what they could do if time wasn't a factor. While the app is focused on new Canadians, New Routes can be used in the real estate market to offer more economic and social data for those looking to purchase or rent a new home. Government of Canada and provinces could also use this tool to determine how resources should be allocated. Finally, the tool could also be used when job searching in a different city. Electric Sheep have just scratched the surface of what New Routes apps can do for Canada. This is the Government of Canada Apps Gallery. It's over 62 apps from Canada, September, the process for security and citizens managing Data is a unique ability to make truly endless. Today, there are thousands of data sets available on the open data portal data.gc.ca. Check out the apps now to see unique ways open data is being utilized. There are many areas where we can expect open data to be of value and examples of how it is already being used. And another unique initiative that Nick Scott mentioned this morning was the Open Government Tour. On July 2nd, Richard Pietro, he packed up his things and set forth on a cross-Canada journey on his motorcycle. He describes his 20-plus city tour as changing Canada by exploring it, spreading his passion for open government, open data, and civic engagement by facilitating dialogue with citizens. His focus was on education and bringing new voices to the open government, open data conversation. In each city, Richard and a city champion organized creative events where citizens, public servants, students, developers, and corporate representatives were invited to participate in discussion around how they can improve their community through the open government movement. Open government tours served as a springboard for individuals to learn, discuss, connect, and share. Each event was just the beginning. The rest is up to the participants to build on these conversations and determine ways that they can make a difference in their own communities. I just wanted to show you one of Richard's videos. He's very unique he has several videos he's created. He also does some open government and open data memes, so you can check him out on YouTube. So here's a video. And I'll leave you with a quote from our Minister, Tony Clement. Data is Canada's new natural resource. The sky's the limit in terms of what we can do with this material. Thank you.
So our final speaker is Ryan Brito, coder.
Good afternoon. I love visualizing data. I spend a lot of my spare time doing it. But I also have a day job. My day job involves data as well. But about a year and a half ago, I started thinking, what ways can I use what I'm learning during the day to actually act as a citizen and give back using the skill set that I have. And so my very first attempt at this was taking the data that you see, which I got off of the GONB, and just plotting it, just plotting a dot for every single property in the province, and doing that on a simple white background. And I thought, wow, this is really beautiful and striking. And so the simple thing, the simple act, led me down a path of looking at who else was doing this kind of work. And I came across a guy named Nathan Yao, who runs the blog Flowing Data. And so what he was doing a similar thing at a much more advanced level, where he was looking for what they call food deserts. So he took a grid, put it over the United States, and for every point in that grid, he calculated the distance from that point to the nearest grocery store or place for someone to get food. And he used that to find areas and to visualize areas that had a hard time accessing just nutritious food. So I thought, I wonder if I can adapt this and kind of make my own brand to Canada and do something similar. And so what I did was I did a similar one for Canada using the exact same technique, where I looked at health deserts. So areas of Canada where it's difficult to access hospitals or clinics. And, but there's an issue with this. You'll notice that there's a lot of areas that are very, very far away from clinics, but no one's really there. They're in the far north, and it's kind of out wide in the open. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can adapt what he did and grow, build upon it a little bit. And so I generalized his technique to say, okay, let's take any two sets of points. Let's do a set of all towns and cities compared to the set of all locations for hospitals or clinics. And so I adjusted it, got a new map that's a bit more representative. So here you can see there's actually only a few spots in the country that are really far away from a clinic. It's, you can actually get access to this just about anywhere. And if you zoom in New Brunswick, you can get an even better idea of what this kind of looks like up close. Now, do I go back? Okay. And so I put this up there. I left it on my blog and called it a day. Then a couple months went by, and I got this this message from the Vancouver Sun saying, "Hey, we're having a really hard problem here. The government in BC just published or put out a law that said grocery stores can now sell alcohol, but only if they're not within 5 kilometers of an existing liquor store. How do we figure out where the supply is?" And so I'm like, sure, I can do that. I actually built this thing a little while ago that does exactly that. So I took the data, I ran all the grocery stores in the province, compared it to all of the liquor stores, and the next day on the front page of the Vancouver Sun was this article: only 2 of 53 in Vancouver were allowed, and I think province-wide it was maybe 5. And so I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. This was just a project of mine. I had no intentions for this to be doing anything. And then a couple weeks go by, I say, I found this data set that just had the list of all the street names in Fredericton. And so I decided to plot the type of street, whether it's street, drive, court, avenue, road, etc. I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. You can actually see the old development, the new development. The new ones, like down the right side, tend to be a lot more crescents, and they're kind of rounded, and the old ones are straight lines and gridded. That's pretty interesting. I'll throw it up there. And I was like, I actually said in my blog post, this is completely useless. I don't think anyone's ever going to use this. And then 3 days later, front page of Canada.com, William Wolf Wiley, their data analyst, picked it up and made it a whole story around the effects of different styles of development on health and the way people behave and how often they're in cars. And he used my data and applied it to all of Toronto and visualized it there. And I don't say this to blow my horn or to promote myself, but because what happened was I didn't even really see this coming. This is just a project of mine that I started to work on. I started to realize the power that a single person with a small technical skill can have, and the kind of impact it can have. And this happened again when I did a tax breakdown comparing every property in the city and how much tax revenue it generates per acre, and looking at the different styles of development. And I did some data art as well around New Brunswick. But the truth is, it's not just me doing this. There's lots of people that are doing this. In New Brunswick, you have Sean Peterson with Propertize, who I collaborated with to do that tax visualization. Or you have Vincent Beswick-Claire, who's a doctor during the day, but has a blog as well where he does data visualization. And it seems like wherever you look, you find people like this. So in New York City, same thing. And so what started as a project for me started to grow and grow, and I realized there has to be a better way, because we're all kind of doing this work on our own. We're all working individually, and there's no way to really build upon our ideas and to share them and to use one person's skill set to benefit the other. And so when I bumped into David Alston at an open data meeting a couple months ago, he said, why doesn't someone bring this kind of initiative to Canada, because it exists elsewhere, and start to build upon this and create a community that allows people who love to do data visualization and to communicate data to work together to build these kind of things and do it on a regular basis. And so today we're announcing Citizens Code. It's what I'm calling a creative outlet for technical citizens. And I loved Nick's analogy earlier of the Bones Brigade, because this really is the Bones Brigade of open government data. We're a group of people, we love doing this, We love pushing the boundaries, and we know that if you release the data, or we can guarantee that if you release the data, we're going to do something with it. So if you're in government today, you find yourself a bit resource strapped. I know that I've met a lot of very, very talented people in the province working in government, and you need an extra helping hand. Come talk to us. We have day jobs, but we love to do this on the side. We would love to build on the work that you're doing and give you a different perspective, and hopefully contribute and add value to that. And so you can visit us at citizensco.org, and I would love to speak to you at this event as well. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions. I don't expect everyone to come up here to the stage. So if you do have a question, just please stand, identify yourself, and answer the question, and identify to whom the question is directed. And I don't think the cameras are running, so that's okay, right? Yeah, so just try and make yourself heard. So do we have any questions for any of the speakers so far? Don't be shy.
Is it on? Okay. This is a question for anyone to take up, but what's your big data wish? What's out there that you don't see yet that you'd really like to see coming from government?
I think I alluded to it earlier when I asked the question. Make the data easier to get. It's that simple. And make sure that it's quality. I know I wish Monica Howard was here, because I had conversations with her where she said, if you try to use population data in the province going back more than 10 years, it's completely unusable. It's as bad as it gets. And so we need to make sure that we have the right standards today so that 20 years from now, we at least use the last 20 years of data. It needs to be easy to access. So if you're in government and you're releasing data, try not to put it in PDFs. It makes my life really hard. So I'm happy to work with you on the best ways to do it. But just whatever data you have, make it easy to access and make it easy to work with. And that'll make a lot of our lives a lot easier.
Did anyone else want to respond to that question? Paul, do you have a wish list?
If there's anybody from Revenue Canada, I'd like to know my tax information from '86 So I would love to be able to log on and go back, because somebody did a news article saying that post-secondary graduates earn more compared to just high school graduates. And I was trying to compare myself to the article, and I couldn't. I only have tax records from back in '95. So, and I did go back when I graduated from high school in '86. So,
There is tax information available through Statistics Canada. Provides a lot of publicly available data sets where you can get average. I don't think we can identify your tax return just yet. We're working on it, but you can certainly see average income, wage and salary income, self-employment income by occupation, by industry, and by location. So you can kind of benchmark. And I know the province of New Brunswick itself is very interested in looking at these kinds of things. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, for all of the data that are being made available through provincial research data centers, a lot of health data, a lot of social development data, the final frontier is tax data. It's owned and controlled by CRA. And there's a huge amount of interest from every sector in being able to look at tax data, particularly in the environment where there's no long-form census. Do we have any other questions for any of the speakers or comments generally? Okay, well, we'll start the coffee break a little bit early, and I believe we are back on at 3:45, so it's a long break, and we will have our final keynote speaker for the day, Paul McMillan. So I'll see you then at 3:45.